Welcome back to episode 4 of the A3A podcast. We're just a bunch of amateurs here. I'm Nick. And then we
I'm
got
Justin.
yeah.
Amateurs, people.
Ultimate amateur. Yo.
I should have been like,
me,
SpongeBob.
me and Justin were both waiting for each other.
we got a
that's
lot
right
to
up.
talk about this week. We have college football and NFL and a little bit of MLB after that. But right here in this episode, we'll be talking about college football. So, Walter, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let's
Pun intended, right? Kickoff.
Yeah, you see what I did there?
I guess we'll just start off with number 24 Illinois at number 22 Nebraska. Good game there. I think we all expected that. I am kind of shocked Illinois pulled it off, just being that lower Big Ten team. Usually seems like they turned things quite around there.
Yeah, definitely. Fighting Illini. They're coming back. If I'm not mistaken, Brett Bielema, coach, right?
Yep.
All right. So he's got some experience with the SEC because he was at Arkansas too, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's got them playing pretty good. I didn't get to watch a ton of this game, but I did definitely watch the overtime. And did Nebraska have a 3rd and 42, if I'm not mistaken?
They did.
Yeah. Not what you want to see in overtime. Not great.
That's not even the craziest one this year, though. I think there was one that was first and 50 something, I believe.
Yeah, I remember that. I forgot what game that was too, but yeah.
I think it was a Missouri game.
Some of that was for at least Nebraska was penalties, and then some kind of boneheaded plays by Dylan Raiola too. He's a freshman, fine, but he's no Pat Mahomes yet. We know that's what he wants to be.
Nah, but I mean, Pat Mahomes was kind of mid in college with the Texas Tech team, so he's kind of, I guess he's on the right track.
I guess so. I saw this an interview with him recently, and he was trying to say, "Oh, 15's because of Tim Tebow, and like I've had this haircut." So like, all right, buddy, come on, just
give me a break. And what's the pregame routine? And
where's the kneeling? Where's the Tebowing?
Yeah. What about the arm sleeve and the wristbands and
the Viper sunglasses? Come on, come on.
Like, please give me a break.
I try to remind myself that he's like 18 or 19, just to not
yeah,
out of too much.
Yeah,
if I was that age, I'd probably be doing the same thing.
I find myself doing that too, and it's like at the end of the day, it's okay to have role models. And I guess if you're modeling yourself after anyone, Pat Mahomes is probably a good
he's the one
model, right? Illinois quarterback Luke Altmaier threw 4 touchdowns. I don't know the last time an Illinois quarterback threw 4 touchdowns in a game, but I'm pretty sure it's not too recent.
Yeah, especially against a ranked opponent too, on the road.
Yeah, good point. Illinois only allowing 1.5 yards a carry. Now that's probably the worst I think we're going to see this year, to be honest.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I don't really know how you would get that going, but I don't know how much is Illinois' defense or Nebraska's lack of running game.
What doesn't help is I'm looking at the stats now.
Yeah.
Dylan Raiola, rushing wise.
Yep.
7 attempts, negative 52 yards.
Yeah, that's because in college, I think sacks go on your rushing tally.
And he got sacked 5 times. But man, that's something I've never seen.
That's brutal.
That's not going to help it at all.
Yeah.
And ultimately, Nebraska falls out of the top 25, which is kind of shocking to me. I think there needs to be a little bit more weight of losing to another top 25 team. And I think them dropping out is a little harsh. I'm not sure who the bottom 5 are in there, but I don't know if pushing them out of the top 25 was a good call. What do you think?
I think they're probably a top 25 team, but after a loss like that at home, and like, yes, it got to overtime, but like the overtime was not close.
No.
When you have a loss and you're that close to the later half of the 25, I feel like you're just naturally going to drop out.
Yeah.
Some teams ahead of them now: BYU, Kansas State, Texas A&M. There's one other one here.
A&M
Boise
has
State.
not looked good either, really.
No,
I could see Boise. I could see Boise, but
Yeah.
A&M has not looked good. Even when they've won, they have not looked good.
Right. Yeah, you got to take those other teams into account too. It's just natural that you lose and you're that close to the edge of the top 25. I expect them to be back in it at some point, but I think that's
I think for
something
sure they
certainly
will.
after. It is. I don't want to say it's like a good loss necessarily, but losing at home to a ranked opponent is better than losing to
For sure.
Tennessee or something like that.
And also losing at the beginning of the season is a lot better than losing at the very end.
Exactly.
Because at least now you have a good amount of games to jump back and try to get back into the top 12, is it?
Yeah. And you get some like recency bias, if you will, like towards the end of the season too. Like if that loss is earlier on in the season, people don't weigh it as much probably, and then you can kind of see
especially if you're Notre Dame.
So yeah, it's true.
Especially if you're Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Moving on, number 6 Tennessee, and number 15 Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's SEC debut. Good. I want to say good game. It was a good defensive game, but also just sloppy offense. A lot of sloppy offense. I think there was 5 turnovers total between the two teams, and I caught this game, and there was a Tennessee turn. So both of Tennessee's turnovers ended in a Oklahoma turnover. So Tennessee, yeah. So Tennessee, let's say, threw an interception, or no, there was a strip sack, I believe, and Oklahoma was on the goal line. And then the next play, they fumbled and gave it back to Tennessee. So that ruined that. And then fast forward a little bit, there was a play where it was an RPO, I guess. It's the first ever backwards lateral RPO I've ever seen. And the coach said that too.
Oh, God.
But he threw it and ended up being a fumble, and Tennessee recovered again. So Oklahoma lost out on like 12 points right there at least, or 14 points at least, because Tennessee ended up capitalizing on both of those turnovers or re-turnovers, whatever you want to call them. Obviously, the coach was none too happy, so he ended up taking what was his name? Jackson Arnold. He took him out of the game after 2 turnovers. How do we feel about a guy turning probably one of the biggest games in his life, but also in Oklahoma entering the SEC for the first time? Granted, it was at home, so that makes it a little bit worse for him, but do we feel the benching was necessary?
I mean, in that game, he really wasn't playing too well. And I don't know too much Oklahoma, but like I have heard his name before. It's not like one of these like random guys that they, just throw out there. So he does have some weight to him, I guess. And I did see that they do plan to start Michael Hawkins is the backup's name over Jackson Arnold. They're going to start him next week over Auburn. So that's kind of a quick way to lose your job. I don't know if they were really like playing too badly prior to. But I think this brings up a good kind of thing to monitor throughout the season is these teams entering a new conference and seeing how well they fare, right? This doesn't seem like typical SEC ball with, 5 turnovers combined, right?
No.
And that's kind of along the SEC sometimes. But this game, we'll talk about USC Michigan later. That's another one, USC coming into the Big Ten. It's just going to be interesting to see how these teams match up talent wise and just like overall how good they are. And at least with this one, Michigan game too, it doesn't seem like the new teams are being welcomed with open arms in terms of, being successful as of right yet.
No, and I think there's a little bit of a competition thing there. Remember when it's such a weird comparison, but remember when Bailey and Kerrigan combined schools?
Oh,
there was like that turf war. I think there's something like going on with that a little bit of like, hey, you're coming into our conference and we are gonna beat you up to no end, kind of thing.
For the listener, that's our middle schools that we went from just like 2 different middle schools in our town to one combined for 7 and 8, and it was the biggest thing ever in the town, and
Yeah,
it was weird.
it was big news, but it was like that territorial thing.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to compare this benching to another sport.
Mhm.
Nick, if a goalie in hockey is struggling, how quick are coaches likely to pull the trigger and flip goalies?
Ooh, depends on the context. I would say if this is a rookie goaltender, right? And they're having a tough game, especially if it's like in their first 10 games, they're new to the sport. I would actually say they're going to pull them pretty early because you don't want to just keep that young goaltender in there and just get absolutely peppered.
Mm-hmm.
That's not right. We saw a long time ago Patrick Raw. He was kept in a game, and I think he let in like 9 goals, and he wanted to be pulled. It was really bad.
They said, "Nope, you're going to learn from this."
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Well, coaching decision because he was with Montreal at the time, and then went over to the Avalanche and won a ring with them. And he left Montreal on a sour note because of that game. So I would say it definitely depends on the context. But as we saw with Patrick Raw, even in a veteran scenario, you want to be pulling your goalie before it's too late. You don't want to expose them because sometimes the skaters in front of you, the rest of the team, they just don't have the gas. And it can make one position like quarterback or a goaltender, it can make that position look so much worse just because the rest of the team isn't putting up performance.
And it's very obvious when quarterbacks and goaltenders are playing bad.
Oh,
like
yeah.
the rest of the players could be accounted for 100 different things, whether it's a wide receiver, an O line, or whatever the case is, or goaltending. It could be the defense. It could be not generating enough offense. So I think they're very comparable. I do agree with getting a player, especially a young player, out before too much damage is done because you don't want to hurt their confidence either. Like, can being benched hurt their confidence? Yes, but I'm willing to bet it's better than sending them out there every time and turning the ball over 2-3 times a game. So I personally do think the benching was warranted, and it just wasn't enough to win the game, obviously.
To give a little bit more context with that too, I was just looking up like how Oklahoma's fared since the beginning of the season. First week they scored 51 against Temple. Jackson Arnold played pretty good. Next week 16 against Houston. Jackson Arnold, I think he was 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, so not really lighting the world on fire. Then next week Tulane 34 points against them. Again, like kind of fine stats.
Yep.
I think with the benching against Tennessee, I don't know how you guys feel about this too, but is it? I don't know how to frame this. I guess when is that benching most appropriate? Is it appropriate when it's against a top 10 team in the country, right? Or is this something that like okay, you have him play the rest of Tennessee, see if like he can kind of turn on the second half or whatever, and then if that doesn't happen, then all right, that's a top team in the country. We can move on and either try you against the next opponent or try to go to the next after the next opponent. Like I think that's a tough question too. I mean, looking at the score too, it ended up only being a 10-point game. So maybe they thought like, okay, we got to do something to stick around with this and see if we can win this. But I don't know what your guys' thoughts are on like the benching at least against like a top 10 team too.
Well, I think it's much more about timing, perhaps, and your patience level. This is their first, obviously, Oklahoma, it's their first SEC conference game ever. So there's a lot of pressure there to win, and a lot of pressure in different ways too. But
it's at home too.
Yeah, I feel it's definitely tricky because you don't want to be too quick to bench your guy who, like I said, it's his first big time game. But also, if you're really trying to win, how long are you going to wait to make a change? What happens if they make a change and they end up winning? They score 20 points in the second half and win the game. You know what I mean? So it's tough balancing the too early, too late. I think it's personal preference, to be honest. What I would have done was I would have gave him another drive or two, not necessarily a whole quarter, and let that dictate what I was going to do. It didn't even get to halftime, the benching. After that second turnover, I believe I could have my point in the game mixed up, but as soon as he turned that ball over the second time, he was out. So it was kind of just an immediate, very clear cut decision of you turn the ball over twice, it hasn't looked good, we're trying something else. Which props for winning in the long run. We're gonna have to see how that plays out. Honestly, there's no way of telling because they might need him later in the season, and they might have just kind of destroyed him. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a little like slightly different situation, but that I'm pretty sure it was last year that happened with the Jets, where they benched Zach Wilson for what was it, Tim Boyle,
Yeah.
who is terrible. Pretty sure he
Mhm.
went to UConn, so that tells you most of what you need to know, and at least about his quarterback play. But they benched him for Tim Boyle. Tim Boyle was absolutely horrible, and Zach Wilson didn't want to come back in later on in the season, partially because his confidence was taken, and he probably figured he was going to be getting traded at the end of the season too.
Right.
So he's got to keep some draft stock available. Yeah, it's a tough thing. I'm a little slightly different situation too, but I'm kind of going through it with the Patriots now with having Jacoby Brissett, knowing when to bench him and bring Drake May in. You don't want to bring him in too early, to tank his confidence if he's not able to, play well or whatever. We'll get to that when we talk about the NFL. Yeah, I'd say this position more than others is probably the toughest to know when to make the call and how to make the call.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, I think it's mostly coaching style is what it comes down to. Like I said, we're not going to know how it plans out until we see more, especially it being their first big time game. So we'll have to see how it ends for Oklahoma. Next game is Michigan upsets USC 27. Was it 27-24? I was very surprised about this. I probably shouldn't be that surprised considering USC is a little bit known for blowing some of these games. However, the amount of offense Michigan has put together is almost negative. It might as well just be negative. I don't know how they're doing it. Do you think? Because last year we saw this last year is Michigan's defense and run game led them all the way to the championship with McCarthy making those 1 to 2 big plays, big throws when they needed to each game. Does this year's team have that quarterback that can make those throws that they can keep up this defense and run game all the way through the playoffs? Do you think it's possible?
Let me clear my throat. No, I don't think so. Well, so just based on my observations, again, biased. I'm an Ohio State fan, as I've said, but just what I've kind of seen from Michigan the past few years, when they had J.J. McCarthy, he didn't light the world on fire. He didn't really carry the offense, but he made the plays when he needed to. He just pulled the play out of his butt and made a miraculous throw. Or I think it was in the Rose Bowl last year against Alabama when he had that, what was it, like some wide receiver running back pass that he had to jump up way high and catch, and then he threw the ball, something like that, where he just make a miraculous play, right?
Yeah.
They had that. They had that where, okay, the running game isn't quite working right now. That's our bread and butter, but he can bail us out just in this moment. We're not asking him much else to do, right? He was capable of doing that.
Right.
Now with their quarterbacks, they don't have that. You saw Davis Warren when he's playing against Texas. He had a bunch of interceptions. Really, and at second half he played a little better just because Texas wasn't trying as much anymore because they had the game in the bag. But they don't really have much on outside besides Holston Loveland, their tight end, I believe that's his name. And then they just don't trust either of them, whether it's Warren or Orgy, to throw the ball. Alex Orgy had 7 completions for 32 yards. That's it. That's all he did. And to be fair, they had that game last year where McCarthy played against Penn State. They didn't throw the ball the whole second half. They are capable of doing that, obviously, right? But then they have some games where they do need to throw the ball. And they had that with McCarthy last year. I don't think they have it this year. But I will give credit where credit is due. That Mullings, Keon Mullings, I think his name is, the running back.
Yep.
Can we just take Donovan Edwards off of the cover of college football and put him on? Because he's better. Like, Edwards is, at least in what I've seen of him this year, he's just like the first guy that's hitting him, he's dropping. Like, he doesn't really have that. He can break some longer plays, but he isn't able to like get through contact and get the extra few yards. So Michigan rant over. Sorry for those Michigan fans, aka my girlfriend. That was going to be happy with my assessment. That's kind of what I'm thinking for them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very tough for them to hang in there unless the quarterback play bumps up a little bit. Again, it's a young season right now. We'll have to see.
It's still a good win against a good USC team because they beat LSU.
That's what I'm saying.
It's something. It's not like
they could be in a lot worse position right now.
Oh, absolutely, especially considering their quarterback play. But their defense and their running game has kept them in it. For sure.
Yeah, and then honestly, we'll just get into the new top 12. I figure we picked the 12 for the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
We got Texas at 1, Georgia at 2, Tennessee at 3, Ohio State at 4. Let's start with that. How do we feel about that top 4 right now?
I think that's perfect. Texas, obviously, they have the win against Michigan, and they're playing well with their backup quarterback, who at some day might be better than their starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Georgia, they haven't lost. We don't really need to, kind of discount them too much for that Kentucky game. They still won it, and they have a lot more to prove this weekend against Alabama. Tennessee, they have a win against Oklahoma. At Oklahoma, that's a conference opponent now. So that's a good win. Ohio State, I think that they are either like one or two top talented team in the nation, but they haven't played anyone yet, right? They have Oregon coming up. They got Penn State, all these other conference games coming up. But right now, they just haven't played anyone. But watching them for the past few weeks, they're so loaded on offense, man.
Yeah,
like Judkins, Abuka, Carnell, like all these guys have such a big playability, which they didn't really have last year. They had some of the same players, but the offense just wasn't clicking like it is right now. Again, it's Marshall, Akron, big whoop, but still, they're able to execute, and we'll see as they get into their conference schedule if they're able to keep up with it.
Yeah,
but I think.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that 1, 2, 3, 4, that's a perfect ranking as of right now.
Honestly, I think the only argument that could be made is the Ohio State and Alabama, because Alabama's sitting out at 5, only strictly because of schedule right now.
Yeah, and they have that good win at Wisconsin, and they kind of dominated that whole game, and Jalen Miller.
But really, that's the only other win. That's the only other win that they have over Ohio State right now, because Alabama's also started with kind of the same type of schedule.
Right, and they seem to be the same old Alabama, at least right now. I know that they're not favored in their next game at home against Georgia, which is the first time since I think 2007.
We're going to talk about
that. Which is kind of strange, we're so used to Alabama being the team.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think that they're playing pretty good for having a whole new coach and losing some players.
Yeah, and then you got, like I said, Alabama at 5, Ole Miss at 6, Miami at 7, Penn State at 8, 9 Oregon, 10 Utah, 11 Missouri, 12 Michigan. Now here's the question I want to ask. Out of those bottom teams, so Alabama at 5 through Michigan at 12, out of those teams, who's most likely do you think could pull off a championship win this year? So far in what we've seen.
Man, that's tough. It's tough not to say Alabama, at least for me. Just again, new coach, new regime, whatever. But still, a lot of the same players have been there. Milroe was just
Nick
in the Rose
Saban's
Bowl.
fingerprints are still on that program right now.
Exactly. And a lot of those other teams are good,
Yeah.
but they're unproven. We've talked about this where, Miami. Oh, Miami's back. It was kind of the same thing with like Texas for a while. Now Texas is
Yeah.
back for now. But
Yeah.
it's always like, oh, when's the U going to be the U again, right? Same thing with Ole Miss. They, have Jackson Dart at quarterback, who's pretty good, but they still really haven't been able to put a full championship-like season together and capped it off and maintain that throughout the season. So at least for me, just that consistency with Alabama still. Of those teams, I'd pick them right now. Would I be surprised if someone else in that group, came ahead? No, not necessarily. But just my gut feeling would just be Alabama until they prove us really otherwise. It's like you said, they still have that Nick Saban fingerprints on what they got going on.
So Alabama is obviously the easy answer, right? There's just something in my gut, and they might not be quite there yet. I'm eyeing Missouri.
Yeah.
For some reason, they just play gritty, tough football, and they're just finding ways to win. They're not always the prettiest wins, but they're finishing those games.
Yeah, which I think is helpful too. Like they have that one game against BC that they really needed to gut out.
Yep.
There were times when, like at least for instance with me with Ohio State, where I get kind of nervous on how they are just steamrolling teams.
Right.
Like I want them to be tested a little bit.
Yeah.
Which like this isn't a full test, but last week against Marshall, they were like I think it was 28-14 at halftime, but like it was kind of a close half. They ended up blowing them out in the second half.
Right.
But like I don't want my team to be kind of complacent. Like okay, like we're just gonna roll through everybody, and we don't have to be as locked in on everything.
They feel like they don't need to earn it.
Right. So I do also like Missouri. Yeah, I think if I had to choose another team too, not just like sticking with the typical Alabama, Oregon's really intriguing too.
Yeah,
they had a I don't want to say shaky start to the season, but they just weren't clicking as well as they should. But they're starting to round into form a little bit more. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if they made a run at it too.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But like I said, Missouri right now, they just have that. They have that character to their football team, and just that finding a way to win is so valuable, even if it's against lesser opponents. Because let's compare like an opponent like Alabama versus Boston College. Boston College is a very good team, but it's not quite at that Alabama level. It is still valuable to be able to push through and get those wins.
Yeah, definitely.
Next up, we could talk about a little bit about the Heisman race. Right now, Travis Hunter is in the lead. Then it's Cam Ward, Ashton Genty, Jackson Dart, and Jalen Milroe. Who do you like out of this list?
So, out of all of them, I've definitely watched mostly Travis Hunter, and I am just really blown away with how good that guy is. Like, I think we might have talked about it last week, where he just reminds me of like a Julio Jones at wide receiver. He's just fast, he's physical, he's big, and then you don't see him on defense because he's that good. They don't throw the ball his way.
Yeah,
right.
He's one that can easily enter the draft as either wide receiver or corner.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what he eventually does. So I think the lack of team success may impact him a bit. We'll see.
I agree. That's where I was going to go.
Yeah, if they're able to round out the season,
now,
that'll bode well for him. But
what I want to bring up about this Heisman thing is the definition of a Heisman Trophy. With the Heisman Trophy is you are the best player on the field of the year you're currently in. I don't, and it has been this way. I don't think it's necessarily right for your team's success to to put whether you should win the Heisman or not in, what I'm trying to say. I don't know if that should be a thing, just because it doesn't say, oh, best player on the field, oh, and national champion, or oh, bowl winner, or oh, top 15 team. This is how I would put it. If you take him out of Colorado, I don't think Colorado has a winning record.
No.
I think he's that impactful to their team. Where you can take any of these other guys. Cam Ward might be the only exception, because I think the same thing with him. I think if you take Cam Ward out of Miami, I think Miami is not as good as they are. Genty is only a running back at Boise State, so you already know he's at a disadvantage being a running back.
Being a running back, and
Jackson Dart is at Ole Miss.
He plays it too.
Yeah. And then Jalen Milroe obviously has stiff competition, just being Alabama and playing who they have to play, Georgia and all those other schools. So I agree. I think Travis Hunter is the guy right now. And the only person I could see beating him out is Cam Ward.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, team success is going to have to do with the two. So if the U can become the U again, then I think that, obviously bodes well for Cam Ward.
Especially
just kind of looking at some of that too. So looking at some of their stats, Milroe, he's been playing quite well. He doesn't even have an interception this season, but just comparing, he's got 590 passing yards and 8 touchdowns. Cam Ward has 14 touchdowns and 1,400 passing yards. That's a massive difference. Milroe does have 6 touchdowns on the ground, which is nothing to sneeze at, right? And Jackson Dart, what's he at? He's got 1,500 yards, 12 touchdowns. So I as of right now, I would just, looking purely at his effectiveness on the field, I would say Travis Hunter.
Yep.
But I don't necessarily think it's going to end up being that. I would lean Cam Ward as of right now.
All right, let me ask Nick this. For a guy who doesn't watch too much, I'm going to lay out 2 scenarios. Tell me which player you think should win the Heisman. It's one guy. Let's fast forward to the end of the season.
All right.
This first guy is on a 6-6 team, 6 wins, 6 losses. However, that player plays both sides of the ball, offense and defense, and not only excels at each position, but could be an argument for he's the best at both position in the country, right? So you have that number 1 player, or the number 2 player, who is, let's say, 13-1, is in the college football playoff, and just plays quarterback, but has ridiculous stats. Who are you picking to be player of the year?
That's a tough one. So logically, I want to say in the name of the award, it's player number 1, because they're the best at what they do. They're the best player on the field in both respects. But my heart wants to say it's actually player number 2, because that player is creating wins. And at the end of the day, winning is everything. So I'm going to go with player number 2 at this moment. But maybe with more context, I'd pick number 1. I feel like in the name of the award, it is number 1, but in the name of the sport, it's number 2.
So I think it's funny you brought that up, because more than other positions, people say the quarterback wins you ball games, right? So you can use that argument for Cam Ward of saying, hey, the other guy's 6-6, despite of what he's doing. I'm 13-1. I'm in the college football playoff, and there's an argument he's the one that got his team there. Yeah. So for sure, I think Justin's right too. I think depending which way Colorado goes, which I think we all kind of know which way that's going to end up being, probably I'd say they have a winning season, but not as good as the Miami season. I would go Cam Ward as well. For
I think if we look back at last year with Jaden Daniels, if I remember correctly, they were 9-3. I think they had at least 3 losses, right? And I don't know about you, Walt, but at the end of the year, I was kind of like, I don't know who I think is going to be the Heisman. Like I guess Daniels.
There was
right?
not a distinct winner. There was not a distinct winner.
There wasn't, and I think that if LSU was better, if they had won more games, then it would be less of a conversation. So I think like that.
Yeah, there would be no
example.
Conversation.
Exactly. That was a perfect example of how wins definitely impacts.
It for sure does. I'm just saying, I don't know if it should.
I agree. But there's a lot of this stuff that should it not. We know part of this is like with the rankings, with the Heisman popularity contest, where you have Ashton Jeanty from Boise State. Like, wow, he's really killing it right now. He's doing great, but
he suffers from being on Boise State.
No offense to Boise State fans. Who cares about Boise State, right? I mean, we do talking about them, but in the national media, it's more so
national media and just your average viewer of college football.
Right.
No one's going to know who Ashton Jeanty is.
Right. And they're going to most likely give it to a guy who comes from a known program that is on the national stage consistently. Like they're playing in a bowl game, they're playing in the playoff, whatever, as opposed to someone who probably has better stats and is meaning more to the team to a lesser team.
I agree fully. Moving on from that, what do we think? Mac Brown, obviously legendary coach. Should he be out at North Carolina? And we are talking about Mac Brown, but I'm going to sculpt this into kind of just coaching in general. Should he be out at North Carolina?
Well, based on the success he's had, not necessarily. But they got mollywopped by James Madison. It was bad. If I'm not mistaken,
real
I'm
bad.
trying to pull up the score really quick.
70-50.
To 50? 5-0?
Yeah, 70-50.
That much? Oh wow, I didn't expect them to that much. Oh my god, that's crazy. But what was oh my god.
They had 5 turnovers.
50 points in the first half.
Yeah.
James Madison. Yeah, that's like horrific. Like, I'm not going to say James Madison is a team that it's not like the Georgia Southern, the Middle Tennessee of the world, where you pay them money to come and beat their ass. It's more of a I don't. This sounds wrong, but a worthy opponent.
Yeah, you're talking like a midline
Yeah,
type of team.
You got to
not bottom of the totem pole, kind of middle of the landscape.
Right. You got to respect them when they come to play you. That is horrific to give up 70 points at home to that team. Great that you scored 50. Great job, but man, that's terrible. And Drake May was there too. He went back to say, hey, like I'm a top 3 pick, and they did not give him a good homecoming. Not at all.
No. James Madison made them look stupid, to be honest.
Yeah.
And it's definitely an embarrassing loss. Mac Brown has obviously stated it was very embarrassing. Now it gets complicated here. They're 41 Mac Brown is 41-28 at North Carolina. However, with little actual Power 5 accolades. So no conference championships, no New Year's 6 bowl game wins. I don't believe. They might have one in there, but I don't think so. Because they've had 5 or less losses, I think. 5 to 4 losses every year that he's been there. If you get rid of him, who are you bringing in to improve the program? Because this is another program that I talked about last week about, how good of a historically your program is. It's not a football school. It's a basketball school.
Yep.
So in my opinion, if they're going 8-4, 9-3, or 8-5, whatever it would be, I think that is where North Carolina wants to be, and I think that's where I think that should be where they're comfortable at. If we're being blunt, there's no way I don't think a team like North Carolina will make it into the playoffs. Not with Clemson in their conference.
Yeah, but that was
not
really
with
my
Miami
point.
anymore.
Yeah, with like him not having like a conference championship or whatever. It's no Big Ten or SEC, but like the ACC does have some worthy opponents that they've had in years
Yeah.
past. Florida State was good last year. Clemson's always up
Yep.
there. Now Boston College
Miami's now kicking it back up.
Exactly, right. So it's not like they're operating a cupcake kind of conference.
Right.
So we can give them some slack with that. My question is, he's 73. Does he want to keep going? Like he's kind of getting up there in age too,
He is. I'm just talking in terms of like, let's say the next 2-3 years. Yeah. I don't think they should rush to get anybody in there. One, because he is probably on that end part of his career. So maybe he's grooming somebody to take over right now. I just don't think the right move is getting rid of him for no reason. It sounds harsh, but I think their ceiling is kind of what they've been doing is 8 to 9 wins a year in a bowl game.
Yeah, and they've been
and breaking news, there's a lot of good teams in college football. It should be perfectly okay for you to be good with a 9-3 season with a bowl game.
That depends on what school you're at. We can say that about UNC, but if we say that about Penn State, that's a different conversation because
actually Penn State is kind of in the same conversation as they are. Look at who they have to play against and who they have to contend with. It's kind of the same thing. It's just knowing who your conference opponents are, and this is not as far as coaching or the team. This is like outsiders and just looking in. Realistically, they're not going to win because Penn State more than likely is going to take 2 losses right off the bat to Michigan and Ohio State. So you're automatically pretty much toast. Mm-hmm. So, I just think there's a realistic cap to some teams. And you're right. Like Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, I think those teams should be national championship or bust because they're the best of the best. North Carolina isn't the best of the best of college football, and they're not a premier college football school. Yeah. You know what I mean? So for that reason, I think Mac Brown should just stay there, ride it out, and if they can end up slipping into the playoffs at some point, great. Do I think it's going to happen? No.
But we can say that they've been more respectable since he's been there.
For sure.
That's for sure. He can produce some.
And that's what I mean.
But
that's what I mean.
Yeah,
8 to 9 wins a year.
That's plenty for a program like UNC. I think he should probably stick around.
Right, and that's what I mean, especially as outsiders. Like nobody's, even with the lower teams, like you just mentioned, James Madison. You think a ton of James Madison people are thinking national championship every year? No.
Well, if they keep going, they might be like UCF and declare national championship.
Well, if you're a seasoned college football watcher, you're gonna know like each fan base kind of has their realistic expectations. For example, your expectations should be national championship every year because that's the level at Ohio State's at. For me with Army, it's beating the service academies and getting to a bowl game. That's it. Don't care about anything else.
Yeah.
I don't we'll get into it in a little bit, but I don't care about playoffs or anything like that with them. Beating the academies and getting to a bowl. Don't even care if they win a bowl game. Mm-hmm. But anyways, we can move on. Justin, you mentioned it quick, but Alabama are home underdogs for the first time since 2007. That speaks volumes to what Nick Saban's done there.
Yeah.
I never thought I'd see that day, to be honest. And honestly, I kind of take this stuff with a grain of salt of who's favored and who's not. It's kind of just, I don't know, it's for betting purposes. And I feel like it's hard to say like, oh yeah, this team will definitely beat this team by 4.5 points which is not even possible. But
That's how they set it to get the over and under for
Yeah.
people to bet it. But I for some reason, most of the time, the lines that Vegas sets it's pretty close. I don't know how they do it. They got some
Mhm.
algorithm, but yeah, only 2 points, so nothing crazy. But yeah, it's so we were, at least for me, I was 10 years old when last time they were home dogs, which is wild.
That's actually insane.
Yeah.
They are right up there with, just premier programs, sport programs, along with even just professional ones like the Patriots, the Steelers. Nick, I don't know if there's anyone in hockey that has a franchise quite like that.
The Habs
that just
Canadians.
steamrolled a decade. Yeah,
Yeah.
We don't like the Habs.
Just honestly a crazy little fact that I was just like, honestly, for that reason, I would have made them the underdogs. Just for that reason. It's pretty nuts.
Yeah, but it makes sense that it's against Georgia, since they we talked about it maybe last week. They haven't had a regular season loss in some time.
Yeah.
And I've gone back and forth on who to pick in this game for a couple days now. Georgia wasn't in action last week, and last time we saw them, they didn't really look great against Kentucky. I think
so. Granted, a lot of time to kind of fix what was wrong in that game too.
That's my point exactly right. So they are able to rest up, analyze what kind of went wrong, and I think I'm gonna pick Georgia. It's gonna be a close game. I don't think they'll blow out Alabama by any means, but yeah, I'm leaning more Georgia in the game of the century part, whatever Alabama's been involved in.
I personally think I got Alabama.
Okay.
For one reason and one reason only, and that's Jalen Milroe's ability to run.
Okay.
I think it's a lot easier when you can rush a passer when a guy is just sitting in the pocket. You don't have to worry about too much, but the way Milroe can just make plays is, and quite frankly, insane. Like that throw last year against Auburn was nuts. You thought for sure they were losing that one. He just zips one to the back of the end zone. Like,
you can sling it from time to time.
So I think he is going to be the one and only reason Alabama wins this one. But like I said, like you said, it's going to be very close, and it could go either way, down to the last second, if not overtime.
Yeah, as you said, Milroe's got speed. Georgia does too. Maybe a little bit too much. Oh wait, that's off the field. Never mind. That joke. But I think the X factor is Milroe. Like, if he's able to run around, obviously, but if he doesn't make mistakes and he's able to just kind of manage the game, keep Georgia off the field, kind of control the tempo, I think that they'll have definitely a good chance.
Yeah. I'm not expecting any of us to know this right off the top of our head. The last time Milroe had a 100-yard rushing game, because I think if he does that, I think Bama will certainly win.
Yeah, I don't know. I would assume some point last year.
Yeah,
he would do it. I'm not, and I haven't watched them a ton, I'll be honest, but I don't know if he's like a my first option isn't there, I'm going to take off and run kind of guy, or is it more like, okay, we're going to have
definitely not.
It not that okay. I don't know if it was like
he definitely goes through progressions. Yeah,
we're going to have like 10 rush packages or rush plays in for him, so he can do that.
Yeah, no,
at least so far this year, he's had a 75-yard game, 79-yard game.
So he's been close.
He's been close, yeah.
Okay, so I think that's a safe bet. If he can get over 100 yards, I think that gives him a good chance.
He had 155 against LSU last year.
Dang.
And then 107 against Auburn. There you go. Only 29 against Georgia, the game that they won.
Yeah. They won. Alabama won that.
SEC championship, right?
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. That's right, because Georgia was in the
Wow.
playoff. Yeah. I mean, he didn't really throw the ball too well. 13 of 23 for 192, and I mean, 2 touchdowns. That's good. Took 4 sacks.
Yeah.
But didn't lose them the game by any means. I don't think.
All right, we can let's press on. We're going to talk a little bit about the service academies, particularly about two because the other one has kind of been idle. Navy's quarterback is in ninth place for the Heisman right now.
I did not know his name until I looked at our notes. I had no idea this dude existed.
Yeah. It was kind of like the first few games of the season was kind of just like, oh, okay, this guy looks good, and then he played Memphis and just annihilated them, and now it's kind of like, well, oh boy. And being ninth for the Heisman as an academy player is quite impressive. Navy's had a few of them actually. Malcolm Perry. I can't remember the other one's name to be honest.
Keenan Reynolds.
Keenan Reynolds.
Ah, there we go.
Keenan Reynolds. They've had two that were definitely in the mix for the Heisman before, especially Keenan Reynolds because he still owns the quarterback rushing record, I believe. But yeah, they seem to get those guys all the time. I don't really know how, but quite impressive. And if Army and Navy win this week, it'll be the first time both teams start 4-0 since 1945. That is, that is quite. That's quite a statistic there. I know.
Army and Navy were quite active in 1945 too.
Yes, they were. They were.
Second World War II joke in as many weeks.
Yeah.
I don't know why I'm on a World War II kick, but gotta watch Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Army would be Army's winning national champions and wars back in that day. But
cool flex, bro.
So I bring this up because my family had this discussion earlier in the year because now that Army and Navy are in the same conference, what would the conference championship look like? What would Army Navy look like? And I literally said before the season multiple times, I said, and I quote, Army and Navy will never be like that. Both teams will never be that good where they'll win the conference in the same year. That's literally what I said, like rewind 2 months ago. I said neither one of them. So at some point, either one academy is going to be very good and the other one's going to be or bad, right? That just kind of seems how it's been going. They're never both going to be that good where they can win. They could be in the conference championship together, right? Well, now they're both potentially going to be 4-0. And Navy just beat up the team that was supposed to win the American. And now it looks like they're on a collision course to playing 2 weeks in a row.
Wow.
So the actual Army Navy game.
Able to take that?
We'll find out. Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not.
You're gonna have early onset heart failure. My goodness.
That's not going to be fun. But I want to talk about this because some reason Army and Navy did not want the Army Navy game to be a conference game. I think that's because they want it to stay on that date and not move it up. It would have to potentially move up to Thanksgiving weekend or whatever, and they didn't want to do that. So the American agreed it would not be a conference game. So if Army and Navy are in first place of their divisions or whatever it is, or however they determine that now, they would have to play 2 weeks in a row. I don't love it. I'm like, well, if that's the case, why couldn't you just make the Army Navy game the conference championship? I don't really understand what's the point of playing the same game 2 weeks in a row.
Well, I think it's money, partially.
Well, yeah, obviously, yes, money.
Like they play at a neutral site. You're able to bring in fans, and they have like licensing or whatever, all that business side stuff. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, if clearly they're on that kind of path. We'll see if it holds up, as the season goes on. But I kind of like that they're thinking and not moving the Army Navy game another week because that's kind of, I mean, it's kind of like it's your Super Bowl. I know that, but it's kind of like the Super Bowl for the service academies, where that's the only game that's on. So people are going to watch college football. It's
Yeah.
that, and your traditions and the intensity of the rivalry are on full display, and I think it's great for them and great for the sport in general.
Mhm.
So I'm glad that they were able to still keep that at its own week.
Yeah, I think it's good for them. I also think it's good for football. I was listening to somebody, I don't know, it could have been it could have been Herb Street or any of those guys. They were talking about it. And they said it's really a celebration of football because there's no NIL, there's no transfer portal, there's no professional career, most likely for any of them. So it's literally just pure football and the love of football going at it right there.
Hard-nosed,
So
rushing first football from the
yeah,
1940s.
so right, it's like a blast from the past kind of thing, and I think it's gaining popularity because of that like old school kind of vibe because it's so
Jerseys,
different to
uniforms, really
people.
pretty cool too. That helps, at least me. I'm
Yeah,
tuned into the uniforms and play.
yeah. So I just wanted to bring that up because I thought it was interesting and definitely a what could be a very weird year if they both win the American for them to play 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, we'll see if it happens. I mean, I don't want to be rooting for that because go Army, be Navy, but
Mhm.
it'd be kind of cool. I'm not gonna lie, like that'd be a cool wrinkle to the rivalry.
Yeah, everyone will have me on a ventilator. I couldn't
Have an ambulance
imagine.
on standby.
I
Your whole family.
yeah, just I couldn't imagine that. Anyway, moving on. Really quick, just want to mention Reggie Bush files a lawsuit against the USC and the Pac-12. I This goes back to I think Robert Griffin III was doing this with a few other players. I don't get it, dude. They wronged you. They made it finally right, but NIL was still illegal for when you were playing. It doesn't matter that it's legal now. It was still illegal. It didn't happen. Just call it a day, dude.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that?
yeah. I'm just happy he got his Heisman. Like really, when I went to
Yeah, same.
California to last year, and there were literally billboards to like get Reggie his Heisman back. Right, so it
Mhm.
was a big thing in California, which is kind of cool. Um, but he got it back. He's making some money now from the Heisman House commercials, so it's not like he's
Mhm.
strapped for cash, at least in that respect. Um, yeah, like I agree with you. Like it was illegal then. Like yes, it's legal now, but
Mhm.
it's that was what 20 years ago now, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
let's a little
2005.
far gone. Let's just
Yeah.
move on. But that's just me.
Yeah. We don't have to spend much time on that.
Yeah.
Week 5, I honestly probably the biggest game and the biggest talk is going to be Georgia and Alabama, which we already discussed, so we don't have to get back into that.
Yeah.
Is there any other games that stand out to you?
Okay, State, Kansas State. That's a good one. 20 and 23.
Yep.
Kansas State's favored. They have, like I've talked about in the past, Avery Johnson, who, um, you know, he's looking to be a decent quarterback. Louisville, Notre Dame.
Yep.
15,
That's the
16.
one I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is it for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
if they drop
if
this,
they don't
they're
win
going to
this,
be.
then that's a wrap for them. I think
That's
for the
it.
playoff.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be
It'd have to be.
that. I mean, right now it's still looking a little iffy with losing to NIU. That's bad. This is
Yeah.
another home game too. So if they choke on this one, then that should be a wrap on them for sure.
Yeah.
Illinois,
But
Penn State.
that's really.
Penn State's favored by 18 points,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is a lot.
18 points.
Yeah, yeah. I from
What?
what I understand, Drew Ayers like played a little better, and they're still Penn State. They're top 10 team. But give the Fighting Illini some respect. We talked about them earlier. I don't know.
Yo, this is wild. What?
To give you some context too, Ohio State is favored by 24. I should say only 24 against Michigan State. That is a game on the road, but Michigan State unranked. They're like haven't
Yeah.
really been as good as the Illinois is this year, right? Yeah, so that's a little wild. But
Wow. Anyways, I guess that will wrap up the college football episode. We are going to do a separate episode for the NFL. So tune into that. And I will see you guys in 1 second.
my timer's on. 1 second.